Like, do your research and don't copy.
Playboy alum Holly Madison is calling out Crystal Hefner for copying her book. The Down the Rabbit Hole Curious Adventures and Cautionary Tales of a Former Playboy Bunny author says the wife of late Playboy founder Hugh Hefner is copying her writing style in her own memoir. Crystal Hefner came out with her book Only Say Good Things: Surviving Playboy and Finding Myself back in January. And in a March 26th episode of the Lady Gang podcast, Holly Madison accuses her of copying her own memoir.
Anybody who's read my book that came out 8 years ago and then read her book, tell me the narrative voice doesn't sound exactly the same.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Drives me up a wall.
And while the 44-year-old admitted there would certainly be similarities between her 2015 bestseller and Crystal's work, given their tumultuous relationships with Hugh in the Playboy Mansion, she said reading her story felt like reading my own book.
And I'm not saying, when I say narrative voice, I don't mean, of course, we're going to be writing about a lot of the same things. Like, we dated the same person. We might even come to some of the same conclusions. But when I was reading it, and there were sometimes I was like, I feel like I'm reading my own book. This is creepy. Like, she weaves fairy tale references in and out, just like I did, and uses a lot of the same, psychological, catchphrases and things like that. And I'm like, if you take my book and Kendra's book, it's two completely different people, even though we lived there at the same time. Like, it's two completely different voices, as it should be. So I'm weirded out by it, especially since she had a ghostwriter. Like, do your research and don't copy.
She did have a ghostwriter.
Yes.
So
And
the ghostwriter read your book and was
we've
like, here's
written
the book.
2 books. We know what happened. They went in a conference room and someone was like, it was great. Holly's book was great. We want a book like that, but your stories. And then someone went and did that.
And that bothers me.
And though Holly wished she and Crystal could have just done our own thing, she admitted it was comforting to hear that the 37-year-old, who was married to Hugh until his death in 2017, had experienced some of the same low moments while living in the mansion.
And I'm supportive of her telling her story. Yeah. I think we probably went through a lot of the same things in that relationship, and a lot of it's been very relieving for me to hear, even before her book came out, when she talks about feeling like she always felt like she had to walk on eggshells, or always felt like she was going to have the rug pulled out from her under any moment. That was so relieving for me to hear, because I'm like, I was the only one who said that for the longest time, you know? But when I read something and like the narrative voice is the same, it bothers me, especially since, it's always kind of hard to come out and tell your story at first, especially when you're crucified for it. Because when my book came out, he was still alive. It was before the Me Too movement went mainstream. I got dragged.
Yeah.
The book was very successful, but I got dragged.
Yeah.
Now it's a little bit easier for people to come out and tell their stories and to just have the same narrative voice in the book. And, there's people on that publishing team that worked at my publishing house promoting my book when it came out, and it doesn't feel good to me.
E! News has reached out to Crystal's rep for comment but has not heard back. In a recent interview with E!'s Francesca Amaker, Holly Madison talked about if she has any regrets from her time at the Playboy Mansion.
I wouldn't necessarily want to go back and relive it, but I definitely wouldn't change anything, because I learned so much, and I feel like my purpose here on earth is to share my story and to help open people's minds to a different perspective.